Aircraft carriers are symbols of power and a sign of military strength. But even though Germany has always had one of the largest military budgets in the world and is now increasing it drastically again, there are still no aircraft carriers planned for the Bundeswehr. Why? Why is it that Germany, actually one of the world's strongest economies, embedded in NATO structures and with growing security responsibilities, doesn't have its own aircraft carrier? In this video, we take a look at the historical roots, the strategic considerations, and the political decisions that have led to the Federal Republic still foregoing this capability today. Heiliger Stroh says, "Save the most at Holy Now with my code." Aircraft carriers are the most strategically demanding and politically powerful systems that modern navies can deploy. As floating airfields, they allow a state to project air power independently of fixed bases. While land-based air forces are always tied to political permissions, range limitations, and infrastructure, an aircraft carrier brings the runway to where it is strategically needed, thousands of kilometers away from home. The central military purpose of an aircraft carrier is to control the airspace over the sea. Air superiority determines control of the sea lanes. That's why carrier strike groups, consisting of the carrier itself, several frigates, destroyers, submarines, and supply ships, are the backbone of any globally oriented navy. They enable missions ranging from airspace surveillance and fighter missions to precision strikes against targets at sea and on land. In addition, aircraft carriers are tools of power projection. Their mere presence in a region can send political signals both escalating and de-escalating. That's exactly why the major powers in particular rely on these platforms. They create presence, credibility, and, if necessary, military pressure without having to immediately enter into a conflict. Since the majority of humanity lives just a few hundred kilometers from the coast, a country can use its aircraft carrier to project power over most nations. There are different types of carriers, each representing different technologies and capabilities. The United States, France, and China operate Ketobar carriers. Aircraft take off using catapults and land using arresting wires. These ships offer maximum flexibility but at the highest cost. China and India operate Stobar carriers. Takeoff uses a ski jump ramp, landing uses arresting wires. Technically, these carriers are less complex, but they only allow limited takeoff weights and therefore less ammunition and fuel load. The large catapult-assisted takeoff but arrested recovery aircraft carriers and short takeoff and vertical landing carriers are operated by the United Kingdom, Italy, and Japan. They are designed for short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft like the F-35B. The aircraft usually takes off over a ramp but must land vertically. Helicopter carriers are amphibious or specialized ships that don't operate conventional fighter jets. However, they are still suitable for flying vertical takeoff aircraft like the F-35B and Harrier. All these systems share one thing. A carrier is only as effective as its task force. Without air defense ships, anti-submarine forces, tankers, and logistical support, even the most modern aircraft carrier is vulnerable. That's why aircraft carriers are some of the costliest military projects, not only to build but also to operate and staff. In fact, Germany almost commissioned its own aircraft carriers, but it lacked a concept, political priority, and industrial continuity. The ship was, of course, the Graf Zeppelin, one of two aircraft carriers that the German Reich actually laid down. After the Kriegsmarine rearmament under the so-called Plan Z, Germany was supposed to build a high seas fleet that could eventually compete with the Royal Navy. This included aircraft carriers. The Graf Zeppelin was built starting in 1936 and was intended to be a modern, effective operational platform. About 33,000 tons maximum displacement with 2 hangar decks. Innovative catapult systems, which probably wouldn't have worked very well in reality, and a planned air group consisting of fighter planes and dive bombers. The project was ambitious technically, but poorly integrated strategically. The carrier concept had 3 major problems from the beginning. There was no clear doctrine on how the Navy wanted to use these ships. Designed for the North Sea, for example, they were supposed to carry cruiser guns so they wouldn't be helpless even in bad weather. The concept was common in the interwar period and was probably copied from the Japanese Kaga, which German officers were allowed to visit. However, other navies removed these guns during the war because they occupied space and personnel better used for the aircraft carrier's main purpose: deploying aircraft. Secondly, there were no suitable carrier-based aircraft, and the Luftwaffe had little interest in carrier operation requirements. Land-based aircraft have different construction requirements, from less salt resistance to a less robust landing gear, because they don't have to land on a pitching ship. Special aircraft would need to be developed for the German carriers, wasting resources for just a few ships, or they'd have to improvise and end up with inferior planes. Third, rivalries between Goering and the Navy prevented the project from getting the necessary support. Construction was repeatedly stopped, materials were withdrawn, or the ship was repurposed for other uses. Goering, known for saying everything that flies belongs to him, also wanted control in this matter. Funding an aircraft carrier, which would give the Navy its own planes, upset the Air Force's power-hungry chief. The planned sister ship, Carrier B, was started but never progressed beyond the early stages of construction. The war's outbreak made the situation harder. Submarines and conventional surface ships were given absolute priority. That the Graf Zeppelin came to a complete halt in 1940 and again in 1943. The Kriegsmarine eventually abandoned the development of its own carrier fleet altogether. The key point is that Germany gained no practical carrier experience in construction, operation, or pilot training. No carrier culture, technological know-how, or strategic tradition developed, and the effects are still felt today. While other countries spent decades developing doctrine, personnel, and industry, Germany has been left without a foundation in this area. A look at the international comparison shows that aircraft carriers are operated almost exclusively by countries that either pursue global interests, seek regional dominance, or have a maritime tradition that goes far beyond mere coastal defense. The reasons for this are as varied as the geopolitical situations of the respective nations. The United States operates the most powerful carrier system in the world with its nuclear-powered supercarriers. No other country matches this combination of military capability, doctrine, logistics, and industrial capacity. For Washington, aircraft carriers are essential for projecting global power. They enable intervention wherever American interests are involved. They operate more aircraft carriers than all other countries combined. France deliberately maintains its own strategic autonomy with the Charles de Gaulle. As a European nuclear power with global overseas territories, Paris sees an aircraft carrier as essential for independent political and military action. Great Britain and Italy rely on modernized carriers for the F-35B, which are primarily intended to support expeditionary missions. These ships are smaller than American carriers, but they significantly expand both countries' scope for action, especially in NATO operations. China is consistently expanding its carrier fleet. With the Liaoning, Shandong, and the technologically advanced New Fujian, Beijing is pursuing the goal of building a credible blue water navy in the Indo-Pacific. This concerns both the control of regional sea routes and the ability to exert pressure on Taiwan or neighboring states. The Chinese Navy is expected to eventually operate globally. India, Japan, and South Korea mainly prepare for regional threats to their governments. India views itself as a stabilizing force in the Indian Ocean. Japan and South Korea are responding to an increasingly uncertain environment, especially due to China's rise and North Korea's missile tests. Both are primarily relying on carriers designed for short takeoff and vertical landing aircraft. Spain has the Juan Carlos I, an aircraft carrier with very limited capabilities, which is also an amphibious landing ship, meaning it has the capacity to carry landing troops with their equipment. Naturally, a ship designed for multiple functions is only somewhat effective as an aircraft carrier. However, Spain wants an aircraft carrier, not least because of its maritime tradition. Therefore, it was a reasonable compromise for Spain to give the ship additional functions, even if that means it's a less capable aircraft carrier. Despite my criticism, the ship as a whole is anything but bad. Turkey has built one such ship, with a sister ship being constructed. This aims to secure their dominance in the eastern Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Aegean. This is highlighted by Australia having 2 Juan Carlos ships, known locally as Canberra. It's also about securing sea routes and overseas territories. Countries such as the Soviet Union, Russia, Canada, Brazil, and Argentina have operated aircraft carriers, but only in small numbers and with limited capabilities. Their fleets have shown that carriers without proper doctrine, logistics, and industrial depth become prestige objects with limited military use. For Russia, the Admiral Kuznetsov serves mainly as a symbol of national prestige, highlighting its great power status, which still didn't save the ship. But that's another story that I might tell sometime in the future. Even though many nations have aircraft carriers, the pattern is clear. Aircraft carriers are mainly operated by states that pursue maritime interests far from their own coasts, that project power at sea. They have to demonstrate or defend global interests, or they operate aircraft carriers as national prestige objects to show their status as a great power. For land powers without global ambitions, carriers make little sense. A key point for understanding the German situation: even though Germany does not have any aircraft carriers, it can still play the role of one with its current partner. World of Warships is launching its big Christmas campaign, and it brings exactly this mix of calm atmosphere and historical fascination to the screen. World of Warships is a tactical naval game with over 850 realistic ships from 13 nations. Each ship is based on real historical documents, a virtual museum of naval history. And right now is the perfect time to get started. All players who log in during December will receive a free Tier 9 cruiser, 2 permanent camouflages, 2 Santa's gift containers, plus the wintry Nordlöshafen dock and a daily advent calendar with rewards. New in the update, the map Sunset Isle, inspired by historic sea routes between Australia and New Guinea. Popular modes like asymmetric battles, snowflakes, and new commandos are also making a return. If you join using my link in the description, you'll get 20 days of premium right away with the invite code IMPACTFORCE. The Japanese cruiser Tenryu, a 6-point commander, a port slot, and later up to 7 super containers, 40 million credits, 600,000 commander experience points, 100 free experience points. Rare bonuses, and the United States cruiser Boise. World of Warships Legends on consoles is also marking the holiday season with events and rewards. If you're looking for an atmospheric, historically inspired naval game and want to enjoy some holiday spirit, then use my link in the description. It doesn't cost anything and it also supports my channel. Thank you very much. Germany is one of the world's strongest economies, has a remarkable industrial base, and is firmly embedded in NATO structures. Nevertheless, the Federal Republic does not have an aircraft carrier and currently has no plans to change that. The reasons for this are rooted in history, based on strategy, and politically consistent. Germany is a continental power without overseas territories. Its security interests are mainly on the European mainland and in the airspace above it. While island nations or globally oriented powers use aircraft carriers to influence conflicts at a distance, Germany simply lacks the operational scope that would justify such ships. Threats do not arise from distant regions of the world, but from the immediate security environment of Europe. An aircraft carrier would do little to change that. However, Germany depends on international trade, which must be protected if necessary. The realistic threats involved, such as pirates, are more a matter for frigates and corvettes. As for the aircraft carrier, in the hypothetical cases where Germany might actually need one, it is still under consideration. NATO can therefore rely on its allies. The Bundeswehr is mainly a land force focused on collective defense. Even after recent changes, its top priority is deterring Russia and bolstering NATO's eastern flank. Germany's navy secures sea routes, conducts anti-submarine warfare, and collaborates within the alliance. For expeditionary operations that would justify an aircraft carrier, both the political ambition and the military necessity are lacking. Put simply, Germany doesn't need an aircraft carrier militarily. After 1945, Germany developed a security policy culture that emphasizes military restraint. This has influenced the military, weapons projects, and public debates for decades. An aircraft carrier is rightly understood primarily as an offensive military asset, and therefore did not fit into Germany's military self-image after World War II. NATO assumed global maritime power projection, mainly via the United States and the United Kingdom. Germany therefore had no incentive to develop a capability that was already abundant within the alliance. Even after the Cold War, this approach barely changed. Overseas deployments stayed limited and political rules blocked a naval buildup that could be seen symbolically and practically as offensive. But plain old money also plays a big role. An aircraft carrier is not just the ship itself, but a system of ships, aircraft personnel, and decades of infrastructure. The construction costs alone would reach double-digit billions, but the real effort lies in the operation. escorts, supply ships, carrier-capable fighter jets, maintenance docks, and several thousand additional Marines. Today, the German Navy is struggling with the operational readiness of its existing capabilities. The introduction of a carrier would be hardly feasible financially or organizationally. Germany has neither the technical foundation nor the personnel experience for carrier-based operations. There is no catapult technology, no suitable carrier aircraft, no trained pilots, no flight deck crews, and no operational doctrine. Other countries have built up this knowledge over decades. Germany would practically have to start from scratch, all for a ship class that Germany would not operate out of necessity, but simply because it wants to have it. A joint European aircraft carrier is repeatedly discussed. France welcomes this idea because such a carrier would expand its own capabilities. Germany, on the other hand, remains reserved. Political hurdles are high, military objectives are unclear, and the command structure is unresolved. Without a common strategic objective, the project remains a theoretical thought experiment. It doesn't have an aircraft carrier because it doesn't need one strategically, could hardly afford it financially, and it is not integrated into its military or political security culture. This capability's absence isn't a weakness, but reflects Germany's role in a division of labor alliance. Germany doesn't have an aircraft carrier not due to inability, but because it doesn't need one politically, militarily, or strategically. The analysis shows that other countries have built up their carrier fleets to secure distant interests, deter regional rivals, or visibly reinforce their status as a major power. Germany, however, is already part of an alliance system that handles these tasks. This does not create immediate pressure for the Federal Republic to develop its own carrier capabilities. In addition, an aircraft carrier only becomes effective as part of a comprehensive group. However, the German Navy already struggles to keep its current missions and units fully operational. An additional capability complex that would cost billions and require decades to build would be out of proportion to its operational benefit. At the same time, it's important to note the decision against aircraft carriers does not mean military weakness. It follows a clear set of priorities. Germany is investing today in those areas that are truly relevant for national and alliance defense, such as air defense, land forces, command capability, and basic maritime capabilities. Whether this will change depends not on technology, but on Europe's geopolitical role. If the European Union were to develop an independent security architecture in the long term, the question of a European carrier group could arise again. For now, a German aircraft carrier is just a theoretical idea, not a practical armament project. Even harder than building and running it is deciding what to name a German aircraft carrier. Again, Graf Zeppelin or maybe Konrad Adenauer? What do you think? What would be a good name? I think Haino would inspire respect in potential opponents. And remember, if you want to experience a German aircraft carrier virtually, try today's sponsor, World of Warships. There are also really great bonuses for new accounts there at Christmas. At this point, my heartfelt thanks also go to the supporters, especially to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Kamp and to Lieutenant Jans van Eck. Uwe de Vren, nickname 2, Bib Carsten Schulz, Gulaschnasche 4000 Tequila 42, Badass Lawyer Vision Sound Lab P, K, If 1. Wu Mahamori, Robert Veal, 1528 Bertenment, Janice Gu, Anti-X, Sasha Mueller, Cunningham and Eustress, many heartfelt thanks. Without them, it wouldn't be possible like this.